So what makes a good FPS map? You've probably seen this picture flying around the internet for the last couple of years. Sometimes there's a different year in the corner, sometimes there's more captions on it, but it's the same one. It's meant to highlight the regression that map design has gone through in most modern single-player FPS games. Now it may seem like it's a gross simplification, but it's not wrong. I believe the original version referred to the second image as being from the Medal of Honor game, the newer one that absolutely blew chunks and was complete and utter ass. Not saying it was bad, it had to work its way up to being bad. And I heard the second one was even worse, which is honestly frightening. And do you know why the old maps were good? Because they were made to be interesting. They were the game. Well, not actually, but the maps and the weapons were the game. Well, okay, the maps, the enemies, and the weapons were the game. There was no cinematic experience. There was no epic tragic war tragedy thing. There was just the game. And the third of the game was the map. So it had to be good. It also didn't hurt that those maps were made back then by people that understood map design from a very different perspective than some people making maps today. For example, most of you, like especially if you're younger, if you're gonna make a multiplayer or a single player map for an FPS game, what's your first source of inspiration? You're probably gonna say, well, I'm gonna base it on one of the games I liked, one of the games I played in the past. I know, maybe a classic Counter-Strike map, maybe something that was really good in Call of Duty, maybe Blood Gulch, I don't know, something like that. Yeah, at that point, you're basically indicating what the core problem would be going forward. I mean, maps being the basis to building other maps. And then maps being the basis to build other maps that are again the basis to build other maps. And all along the line, the idea of the map gets diluted, it gets lost. I've probably said this in just about every one of these videos, but repetition of the same idea will lead to that idea being just destroyed, being changed, being turned into something that's not the actual idea. It's the shape of the idea, but not the content, not the intention. Because do you know where the old map designs came from? They came from D&D. They came from a bunch of people being massive nerds and playing Dungeons and Dragons and making maps, on a sheet of paper that they would play with their friends, and while playing them, they will understand what made the map interesting. They would see how those players explored the map, how they utilized all its passageways, all its corridors, all its secrets, how they navigated, how they felt. Was this map too big? Was this map too complicated? Was this map too boring? Was it just superb? Was it exciting? Did the players want more? That gives you a level of experience in map design that you'll never get from playing 2,000 rounds of Dust 2, which I'm kinda sad to say I'm probably getting close to, which is a sign I should probably not play CSGO anymore, but hey, that's what everyone else I know is playing, and they keep calling me back to CSGO, and then they shoot me in the back and pretend it's not their fault, Raul. But playing 2,000 hours of Dust won't necessarily make you a good map designer. That is a skill you acquire by actually designing maps, making them, and having players, go through them, play them, and then seeing how they perform, what they enjoy in it, what they don't. Now certainly there are a few staples of this craft. There's the Horseshoe Technique, which John Romero used a lot in Doom, where you would start at one point of the map and you would see clearly your objective, where you had to go. But you couldn't just travel there in a straight line and ignore everything. No, you had to go in a horseshoe shape, a U shape, either by going past some immovable object in the middle, a hazard, or just by placing something that the player would actually maybe want to pick up on the other side, the side that would normally be the long way. And there are other methods to design maps in the grand scheme of things. There's loops, there's figure of eights, there's even circles for the general shape of the map, for the flow of it, for how the player would travel through it. But that's not all. That's not what makes a map great. Because when you get down to it, you could just make a corridor and have it be, you know, a circle or a U-shape or something else. And just pretend that the rest of it has interaction. Dead Space 2 did this a lot. It had areas that had shops on one side, and on the other it made you feel like, hey, maybe I could go into those shops, but I heard a noise coming from down the corridor, so maybe I should go down the corridor. But you couldn't actually go into the shops. You were in a very linear path that sort of pretended to be Bioshock but wasn't. I heard the first one was very good. I only played the second one, and apart from that scene in the elevator and right at the end where you get chased by that unkillable thing, it kind of blew chunks. And people call it one of the best games ever made, along with Mass Effect 2. So back to the maps. What makes a good map? What do you remember about that map? What makes it memorable? Be it single player or multiplayer, what makes a map memorable? That's what you have to have in mind when you're making a map. You have to give the player interesting choices and experiences. If it's that Ice World map from CSGO 1. Now 6 wasn't around back then, 1 point something, I don't know, 1.2, 1. It had a shield, a tactical shield. I don't know if they removed it in a later edition. That wasn't a very good map. It was just a grid. It had all the weapons lined up, but it was an easy map for people to get to understand. They just shoot themselves in the face. But it wasn't actually a memorable map because it was all the same. It was nothing. Compare that to, well, like any other Counter-Strike map. They're built to give you experiences in every bit of them. It's not just one open battlefield with nothing in it that just happens to be the shape of a U where you see the other end, and no. It's not a corridor. It's built out of focal points. You can call them micro maps, small, isolated cases like the banana in Counter-Strike's Inferno, like the bomb sites, like the inside of one of those buildings on Morpheus in Unreal Tournament. Those bits are what make a map good. They get the players to focus on them, to think about strategies that involve using the terrain in that area to their advantage. They give the player choices that are affected by what weapons they have, but still, that map, that single piece, gives a player choices. Do I hide behind a barrel? Do I hide behind a wall? Do I just charge the enemy and hope they don't expect me to come for them? Those choices, what you set out to do, that's what makes a map memorable. If it were just a corridor, a single hallway, you had no choice. You moved forward and you shot something. That's not interesting. That's not me playing. That's me pressing W and click. It's one action removed from Dear Esther, which is not in any way, shape or form a good thing. And it's not just for the player that's killing the other players, it's for the player being killed as well. If the map that you're being killed on repeatedly is a corridor, why are you even trying? If that opponent is faster than you, like he can click faster, he can aim better, you're dead. You have no chances. He will always get you. A good map is there to help a player that's better at understanding his surroundings than he is at shooting. A good map will give any player an advantage if he or she knows how to use it and has the tools, because throwing a flashbang on a banana is usually a good way to cause the enemy to do something stupid and die. And even if you do get killed in a map that's actually made to have interesting geometry, interesting spots, you learn. Even dying becomes a learning experience because you will know how to better use that map because you saw the enemy using it. If it were a corridor, you would not have anything to learn. There would be no progression for you in your skill level, in your knowledge base. Sure, it'd probably unlock a noob tube or something, but that's not important. And if you learn a map well enough, even if you do have a lower skill when it comes to shooting, you may still have a bit of an advantage because a map may have those spots, those little bits that just are designed to give an advantage to a player. It may seem like an unfair advantage, and some maps are sometimes unbalanced in that aspect where you're just gonna find a perfect position that is completely guarded and offers you no possibility of being hit from behind or snuck up on. A good map will have positions that offer a certain risk-reward ratio that will actually make you feel satisfied. Yeah, sure, you could have gotten killed if you got there. Someone could have just snuck up behind you and knifed you in the back or translocated you to oblivion. But they didn't. They weren't paying attention. They didn't see you, and bam! You, the worst player in the game, just got a double kill. You had fun. You enjoyed yourself. You made a memory. You found that bit to be interesting. Now sure, having positions that are advantageous to one side isn't something you're gonna find all that often in games that are made to be symmetrical. This you'll find is very common in Capture the Flag or Capture the Objective, where you have two bases and they're both more or less symmetrical because they need to be, because the game needs to have an equal level of difficulty on each side, an equal playing field. Counter-Strike is not one of those games because the sides switch after 15 rounds. Oh, and mind you, what I'm saying doesn't just apply to multiplayer games. It sure as hell doesn't. Because some of the first multiplayer maps, you know, the ones in Doom, they were from the single player. Like, you could play those single player maps in multiplayer and they would work flawlessly because they were just that well made. They were made to give you those experiences even in single player, with it being divided into sections, with a corridor there, with a central computer room somewhere else, with an elevator this way, a secret that way. Even though the maps were made to have a certain flow to them in single player, they had those sections, those focal points that you could still enjoy in multiplayer. That's why you're probably not gonna see a Call of Duty map from single player translated directly into multiplayer, because it won't work. And to be fair, that's kind of valid for a lot of single player games. Most of them tend to have large maps, linear ones, and very big, that are just not built for backtracking, they're not built for high mobility, they're not built for combat against unpredictable opponents. They're made for encounters. But I'm not gonna go in depth about enemy positioning or weapons or pickups or maintaining the flow of the adventure, just the basic structure of the map. It needs to be interesting, it needs to give the player choices, or at worst, like the minimum bare necessity, the illusion that the player has a choice. And that can usually be achieved by making a larger map that has a more openish nature, maybe something like a forest, or, you know, a more open environment that gives the player the illusion that, hey, I can go anywhere here, but it doesn't actually matter where you go, you're gonna end up in the same place. Some people misunderstand the illusion of choice and give the player the ability to go down a path and then just throw a big wall in their face with nothing to show for it, and then they have to walk all the way back. That's not a fun experience. And some games do it even worse. Oh my god, the worst, absolute worst way you can make a fake choice when it comes to map design is to just outright kill the player when he steps out of bounds, out of the map bounds that he or she did not know were there. There is a famous incident with Rage, the video game that was made by id Software a while ago, where a member of the press, I forget his name, right at the start of the game decided to go in a different direction than the one that the developer wanted the player to go. I believe instead of left, he went right, or something like that. And the developer was standing behind him laughing, and then the character of the player just got killed outright for no reason, because he stepped out of bounds. Because in this world that seemed to be open, that seemed to be so huge, actually going where you could see you could go was punished. And punishing the player for wanting to explore your map, that's one of the worst things you can do. That kinda destroys any kind of wish the player will have to explore the map, because you'll never know when the developer actually wants you to explore or just get killed. It becomes a sort of conditioning based on punishment to get the player to just travel along one specific route, a straight line, dotted with cinematics. You know, this thing. Yeah, don't make maps like the one on the right. That's not a map worthy of an FPS, that is a straight line that someone put some right angles in. Now, unless I have some hardware reviews to do for next week, the next show will probably continue this idea with weapon pickups, enemies, encounters, and you know, all that other stuff that goes into making the flow of the game. Till then, here's your homework. What's the map you like best in an FPS and why? What made that map memorable? Thank you for watching this show. If you enjoyed it, please consider watching some of our other videos and maybe sharing them or giving a thumbs up if you feel like it. And if you really liked what you saw, please check out our Patreon page. For just $1 a month, you could help us make much better shows and get some rewards in the process. Or you could consider buying my book called Tale of Doom. Volume 1 is out now and available for just $2. And as always, if you thought it was horrible, you know where to find me and complain about it.